Hello, everybody, and welcome to Friday Lives. This is actually episode 10, and this is our kind of anniversary episode. And honestly, we started this in May. I couldn't have imagined that it's going to run for so long, and then time will fly so fast. So, yeah, this is so exciting. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This show is powered by Restream Studio. This is how we run our show, and you can check us out at restream.io/studio if you want to run your own live show. Super easy, directly from your browser on multiple platforms at the same time. This one airs to Periscope, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And you can add up to 30 platforms with us if you want to. And you can also invite guests and co-hosts to run the show together with you. Speaking of guests, my guest today is Chris Guillebeau. He is the New York best-selling author, and he is also the author of books such as $100 Startup, The Money Tree, and The Side Hustle. He is also the host of the Side Hustle School podcast that you can find everywhere where you typically find your podcasts. We're going to be talking about live streaming as a side hustle and also live streaming for entrepreneurs and authors, how that can help you leverage the opportunities of live broadcasting to connect to your audience, to connect to your network, and potentially monetize and create financial freedom as a side hustle. All right. Hi, Chris, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Anya. Thank you. I'm glad to be here, and happy anniversary episode.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this is so exciting. Like I said, it was hard to believe that this is going to be the time of life so fast, and we're going to be here so quickly. So, by the way, for those who are interested in checking out Chris's work, here's his website. It's chrisguillebeau.com. You can see it right here. And I'm still getting used to this mirrored camera thing, like right here. So there is a lot of information about his books, about his podcast, about his blog, about his travel adventures, which we are going to talk about today. So this is really, really exciting, very interesting guest. But why don't we get started with you, Chris, introducing yourself to the audience? I did a little intro, my little spiel. So why don't you tell us a little bit who you are?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you again for having me here. And hey to everybody watching on 30 channels or wherever you are, all over the internet, all over the world. So my name is Chris Guillebeau. I have been writing and sharing online for about 12 years. And for the first half of that process, I was completing a journey to go to every country in the world. And so I actually started this long before I was blogging or writing. It was just my own little personal quest. I had been an aid worker for several years in West Africa, really loved to travel, loved to experience new cultures. And I'd also always kind of worked for myself. So I'd always been an entrepreneur or at least self-employed in some way. I wasn't good at working for other people, but I really liked starting my own projects. And so, I guess at a certain point, I started this blog, The Art of Non-Conformity, which you can see at my name. And, began sharing stories of my travels and not just stories of my travels, but just some experiences I had and some ideas about how to see the world in a different way and perhaps accomplish a goal that's important to you. And then all these people started reading and caring, and, here we are a decade later, and I wrote a series of books and I produce events, and I do a daily podcast, which I've been doing for 3 years now. And I just feel very fortunate because I get to connect with awesome people like yourselves from all over the place.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really awesome. Yeah. So let's get started with your story. I know a lot of your books contain stories of people, like how they got to where they are. So how did you start your writing career, and what was your life like before and after?
Yeah. Let's see. How did I start my writing career? I started because I felt like I had something to say. And so my encouragement to anybody watching is like, do you have something to say? Do you feel like you have some message for the world? It doesn't have to be like a big thing. It doesn't have to be like fully thought out, but do you have something, that other people can learn from or perhaps experience themselves or maybe find some inspiration in? And so I felt, in my case, I felt like I was turning 30 years old, and I was like, okay, I've done a lot of traveling and I've been fortunate to be able to work for myself. So I have this little bit of freedom. I was doing like all of this like digital nomad stuff before people talked about digital nomads, like I had that experience, for 20 years now. And so I thought, I've had all these experiences, but there's nothing that ties them together. There's no like thing that people can, go to, like, and so that's when I was like, I'm going to start blogging basically. And I decided to really invest in it. When I say invest, I don't mean money. I mean just like my commitment and like time and passion. I was like, I really want to actually like try to do something here. But I didn't have like a business goal or anything. It was just like I want to share ideas. I want to, hopefully cultivate some sort of community. But there wasn't a big strategy. And so everything that happened after that was just kind of an organic response to my initial desire to, share ideas and connect with folks.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great start when you have something to say, right? Like why not start writing? So your latest book, The Money Tree, talks about finding fortune in your own backyard. So yeah, that's also a concept that you introduce in other books, kind of briefly, that there is this idea that people have that money doesn't grow on trees, but actually it could if you pay attention, right? Like if you turn things into opportunities and if you nurture them. So how does one start, like how does one go about starting to grow money on their trees in the backyard?
Right. To grow money on the tree. Well, I think what I say in the book is like, your parents always told you perhaps, I mean, depending on what culture you're from, but at least you're like in the United States, we have this expression about how like money doesn't grow on trees. It's just not you actually have to work for it, which is true. You have to work for it. But what I'm trying to show in The Money Tree is like, well, if you plant the right seeds, then you can grow a money tree. So, the subtitle is Finding the Fortune in Your Own Backyard. A lot of what I try to do is help people who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, or they don't think of themselves as like, I want to be a big risk taker. They often have regular jobs. But like what I've been doing with Side Hustle School is, every day for 3 years now, just telling different stories of people who have found a way to make extra money without quitting their job, without going into debt, and so on. And so often, like the part about your own backyard, that comes from recognizing that most people are an expert at something. Most people out there, like you actually know something already that's valuable and interesting to other people. And so it's just a matter of finding a way to take that thing and then transform it or adapt it into some kind of product or service people can pay for. So it's very different from, say, like going to business school, go get your MBA, or going on Shark Tank, or trying to find investors. Those are totally different models from what I'm talking about. So my whole thing is to encourage people to like take an inventory of their skills, ask themselves what are they really good at, what do they like to do, and then how can we find, again, like the connection point between that thing and then what other people are going to pay for. And so I look at that in lots of different examples and such.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one thing that's kind of very nicely leans into my next question that I had about your other book, The $100 Startup, which is actually one of your bestsellers, the New York Times bestseller books that kind of started your fame, so to say, as a writer. And one of the concepts that you introduced there is exactly that. There is a passion circle, things that you love to do, that you would do even if you never got paid for it. Certain hobbies that could be potentially turned into opportunities. And then there are other things that people actually need. Like people need food, people need services, people need different things, right? So where the circles intersect, that's where people can make money. That's where great startups start and other business opportunities arise. So it sounds pretty straightforward, right? And logical. Like we kind of all have the concept of what people need, and we kind of all have a concept of what we love. Why do you think people struggle so much in finding that intersection for themselves?
That's a great question. I think there are probably a few reasons. I think, first of all, they struggle because, yes, it is a simple concept, but a lot of simple concepts are not necessarily easy to apply, So I use that word simple deliberately. I don't use the word easy. Like I never say, oh, it's so easy to go and make, whatever the amount of money is or something. It's not easy. It can be difficult, but anything that's worth doing, anything that's really, going to have a real reward is often challenging. It's often like, there's going to be some effort involved. So it's a simple concept, but I think people, first of all, they don't know exactly what to do. They're like, okay, this makes sense. I get the idea, but then how do I actually do it? And so a lot of my work is about practical steps. Like here, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. And I think often we tend to skip steps when we think about something. We're like, okay, number 1 is like I find what is my marketable skill. But there's a lot of steps with that. There's actually like a whole bunch of steps within that one step. So that's like one category of reasons why people struggle with it. I think the other big category, which I probably haven't looked at enough, I'm starting to talk a lot more about this, is just self-doubt or negative self-talk or a lack of belief or lack of confidence in themselves. I hear this phrase all the time about imposter syndrome or like I'm not good. I see other people who've been able to do this, but I don't know how I would do this myself. I don't know how I could apply it. And so I think the combination of these things, like what I'm trying to do, and of course it's imperfect, and there's like there's always ways that each of us can improve. What I'm trying to do is like give people the steps, like here are the steps, and then also show them like, hey, like we're all making mistakes, like everybody's on a journey, but the real power is in like taking those steps forward. And the real power is in like saying, okay, maybe I don't know how everything's going to go and I don't have all the answers, but if I can see one thing, that I can do tomorrow or today, then that's the thing I'm going to do. And then the next day I'll do the next thing. And the next day I'll do the thing after that, So I think that can be very empowering to people once they start, following the process.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Excellent. Another concept that you also talk about in $100 Startup, and I also could hear that through The Side Hustle, which is another book that we're going to be talking about very soon here, is that idea that when you start something such as a business or an opportunity, an extra source of income, you should be very cautious about investing a lot of money into that, right? Like start with keeping your costs low, start with investing maybe more of your time and hours, but not necessarily throwing cash on that. What do you think about this kind of like controversial opinion between keep your business costs low, that's something that you preach, and the idea that in order to make money, you have to spend money, which is something that, like, if you think about startups, Silicon Valley, that kind of stuff, this is the main premise, right? Like, go raise money, go find investors, get a ton of money, invest, scale, grow, and then you're going to be successful. So how would you recommend finding that balance?
Yeah, I'm not so much into balance, actually, Anya. Like, and I
Love
think
that.
this is true in life and entrepreneurship. I mean, like, balanced people, like I'm not very balanced myself, and like balanced people aren't that interesting. They don't change the world. Balanced people aren't the ones that we're interested in learning from for the most part. But to apply it specifically to this, the reason why I wrote the $100 Startup is because I felt nobody was telling this other story. And I felt, yes, there were all these people telling this story about, it takes money to make money, et cetera. Okay, but there's a lot of people who have been able to make money without spending money. So why are we not shining a spotlight on those people? And I actually think this is a good thing, like to bootstrap your business and to not have money. Sometimes people ask, like, I have $1,000 or I have $5,000 or I have whatever the amount of money is. How should I spend it? And I always think that's the wrong question. That's totally the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is what is the best thing for me to do right now? And so sure, there are some businesses that require more capital. And if you're going to, like, I don't know, manufacture some product that has a lot of hard costs and you need to raise money to work with a factory in Asia or something, for example, I mean, even that people have done it, without spending a lot of money. But still, let's say there are some projects, that may require capital. But what I would say is, for anybody watching, there's also a lot of other things you could do that would not require that. And so if your life goal is to become, the Silicon Valley model entrepreneur, then great, go and do that. But I think 99% of people don't actually want that. And 99% of people in middle America or elsewhere around the world, they actually just want to have security for themselves, and they have their own goals, and they want to be able to do something without being restricted by their employer, by some corporation, by some government. They want to be self-reliant. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, is like, what can you do that will actually make money, not cost you money? What can you do that's going to be good for you? Not just, take all your time, but something that will actually produce more freedom. So for me, it's all like the objective is freedom. And like, if the objective is freedom, what is the best way for us to get to that? And I think the best way is to not spend money, but to choose, to find a project that you can start right now where you are without spending money.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it is making, like, I know you don't like to overuse the word easy, but it makes things easier, right? Because imagine how many things you can be intimidated by and kind of like talk yourself out of starting anything, when part of your journey is like, hey, go pitch to a bunch of Shark Tank type investors. Right. Like A
Right.
lot of people will be like, no, that's not me. I'm never doing that.
Yeah, and
But
the other thing is, real quick, just to jump in there, the other thing is, if your whole objective is like, I have to go and pitch to these investors, then you are kind of deferring the responsibility, like the outcome of your project, success or failure, to somebody else. And you're saying like, oh, it's somebody else has to come along and say like, Anya, you are good enough. I believe in you enough that I think you should go and start this project, right?
yeah.
Or no, I don't believe it. And so why would you entrust your well-being and your future and your decisions to somebody else? Why not just say, do I believe in myself? Okay. Why I should start this now. I don't have to wait. I don't have to like try to get connected to the right people. I don't have to, I don't know, spend however much time, weeks or months, or, just trying to get my introduction so that I can pitch, my deck or something. I just feel like there's so many other ways and so many better ways for most people.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching to the side hustle book, which is actually a great one. And that's the one that I listened to recently. And I so enjoyed it because it is such a practical, just hands-on guide on exactly day by day what you need to do in order to develop an additional source of income for you. So I believe this is really timely right now. I know that you wrote the book in 2017 when the pandemic was not around, but now when you think about it, how many people are in this situation with coronavirus, losing their jobs, potentially losing some part of their income, maybe getting some extra free time to work on something they always thought about. But of course, this is a very stressful times. The environment, the political climate is very stressful. So I think this is really handy to think about this. Like this is the silver lining here is that potentially this is an opportunity. This is the time for you to start growing your money tree, to start working on your side hustle. So can you, for those people who haven't read the book, can you just define the key features of a side hustle with good potential as you see it?
Yeah. So, I was being critical of the startup world in my previous answers, which I am still critical, but I will also like apply this criticism to myself and say, okay, what have I learned? And so like when I wrote the $100 startup, I think the subtitle of that book was something like, fire your boss, basically like fire your boss and like go and work for yourself. I've noticed, I noticed since then, like a lot of people connect with that message. And then there were a lot of other people that were like, I kind of actually like my job. I like my job. I have good people that I work with. Or maybe I'm just not in a position to, be able to like quit my job. I've got a mortgage. I've got a family. I've got whatever, And so I just realized there's this huge audience of people that's kind of being talked down to a little bit in the entrepreneurial world because everybody's always pushing this thing about like, oh, you should quit your job right now. Like you go and do this, And so the whole point of the side hustle, as I kind of define that concept, I know it's talked about in lots of different ways and major corporations have used it in their ad campaigns now and such to push their own agenda. But the way that I think about side hustle is, okay, this is an income generating project. So it's not a hobby. It's something that's actually making money that you start apart from your job. So you've got like lots of other responsibilities, which means that you have limited free time. Like this is a built-in constraint, like everybody's doing this has the same constraint to some degree or another. So it's something that you start quickly, preferably because your time is also valuable. Like we've been talking about money, but your time is valuable too. So the way I outlined that whole book, Side Hustle, the subtitle was From Idea to Income in 27 Days. And the idea was like, okay, every single day, here's a different step, and if you take these steps, hopefully you can have a project up and running within a month. And I'm not saying that project is going to make you $100,000, but it can do something, everybody can do something. And what I have seen, like when I was doing book tours, sadly, I'm not doing any book tours at the moment, but I always go to these different events and I ask people like, who here has a project or something? And maybe like half the people raise their hand. And then I ask them like, do you remember the first time you got paid? Like your first sale or your first client, your first customer? And probably about half of those people like have a very clear memory of the first time that they got an email that says like, somebody has sent you money basically. And it feels so very good. It feels so good. So I'm trying to help people get to that. So as to, what makes for a good side hustle, it's like it's something that is simple. It's something that you can explain in one sentence. If it's always a good test of like if somebody's asking you about your idea or something, if your answer is, well, it's pretty complicated, so let me give you some background, let me give you some story, a context, it's like, then that's not a good idea, basically. You need to be able to explain it very simply. This is the thing I'm doing pet portraits, and you can come on my website and pay $100, and I'm going to do a portrait of your pet, for example, whatever it is. So something that's really simple, something that people can pay for. Often this is another problem people have sometimes is they have an idea, but they haven't really thought about how they actually get paid for it. And so I think it's important to think about that from the beginning, not like later on, like right from the beginning when you're thinking about your pet portrait business or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm going to provide this. This is the deliverable, and people are going to pay through PayPal or Venmo or whatever whatever account they're using, and then they're going to get this. So just trying to kind of go fairly simple, practical, like you said.
Awesome. Actually, I want to take this moment and let people who are let people who are watching us know that if you have a side hustle idea or some kind of project and you would like to ask Chris what he thinks about it, please feel free to type it up. Our questions, like you can't actually write a whole novel in there, so I won't be able to display that on the screen. But if you can try to form that in a, like one sentence, like super short elevator pitch of what you're trying to do, we will be definitely taking questions in the middle of the stream. And if your question is, what do you think about my idea? That's a great question. If you have something else that you would like Chris to answer or kind of elaborate on, please bring it on. We will take as many questions as we can in the middle of this show. And since we're kind of in this pause, let me reintroduce you real quick. My guest today is Chris Guillebeau. He's the author of The Money Tree, The $100 Startup, and The Side Hustle. He's also the host of the Side Hustle School and a compulsive traveler, currently immobile, if you follow his LinkedIn account. That's kind of what it says, as we all are, right? Like it's right. Really difficult for people who are passionate about traveling, which is something we'll touch on in the end of the stream, so stick around. So let's talk a little bit more about side hustles. You, in your podcast and also in your book, you have a lot of interesting ideas, and you share like specific examples and practical stories of people who were able to be successful in side hustles. A lot of those stories talk about creating courses, teach others how to do something, right? So basically like teaching service. Do you see how side hustlers could use live streaming as one of the tools to leverage that as an alternative to pre-recorded course or a series of YouTube videos?
Absolutely. I think, well, as an alternative and also in addition to, right? So I think that there's a number of options for live streaming. And I think you could have live streaming itself could be the product. Live streaming is like, this is a way of connecting with people, who are paying perhaps, or maybe you have some live streams that are for everybody, but then it's like, I've got some special stuff, for paying members. Or the other alternative is like, I'm using live stream as, lead generation or to build my community or, just to be available and kind of position myself as an authority in this field, whatever it is. So I think live streaming is like podcasting or like any other like so-called new medium, which is not so new now, but like we just think of it compared to like older mediums in that people are really interested in connection. And like, if they can see you, if they can hear you, then they're having that connection. If they can even type comments in the chat and get a response, like it's so immediate, so I think it's very, very personal. And so whenever there is this personal connection, that lends itself to, all kinds of value. And for me, like I'm mostly interested in, long-term community building. So I'm really not trying to sell something most of the time. Like I try to talk about my books, but it's a very low priced thing, and most of my work is for free. So I don't actually have like a lot of like, here's my sales funnel, and then you can buy this course and then this course and this course. And but for me, I know that there is value in just being available and showing up for people and trying to be helpful however I can and such. So I think it's definitely something people should be thinking about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great stuff. So the Side Hustle School podcast started in 2017, and you kind of started with a commitment to producing one episode per day, every day, no days off, no breaks. Oops. Hey, sorry.
Hi.
That I guess. Hi. I guess I lost you for a second.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I got lost, but I kept talking for a long time.
No, no, you were here the whole time. It was
Oh,
literally just a second. So
oh, good. Okay, great.
I'll just go ahead and repeat my question. So
Sure.
when you started the Side Hustle School podcast in 2017, you kind of committed to
Hmm.
producing one episode per day, every day, no days
Hmm.
off, no breaks. I have a similar commitment for my workout, and a lot of my friends think it's
Sure.
crazy that it's impossible. It is not easy, but committing to creating content on that kind of schedule for me, who is running a weekly show, and I think it
Hmm.
already dominates half of my week every time.
Hmm.
I think that's remarkable. That's fabulous. How do you manage to accomplish that? And do you still do that every episode, every day, one episode, no
Every
breaks, no
day.
days
I
off?
mean, we just came to episode 1300
Oh, wow.
this week. Yeah. So we started January 1, 2017, and every single day since then. And I didn't plan to do it 4 years when I started. I made a commitment to do it 1 year. By the way, I have the same workout goal. With my Apple Watch, I actually have a streak going of like 500 days now with that. So I'm kind of, I connect to those things like that. And I think there's a certain personality type that like, we really like these metrics. We like milestones. I wrote a whole other book about this, like called The Happiness of Pursuit, which is not about business, but it's just like, we find joy through challenge. We find joy through like, these kind of things that are measurable and such. So let's see. So your direct question was about the content and like doing it daily and such. So to me, so here's the secret. To me, doing something every day is easier than trying to do it once a week.
Hmm.
Because if you're trying to do something once a week, then there's a certain rhythm to it, but you kind of, there are days when you're not working on it, and so you're not really thinking about it, or you're working on it less, or something. Whereas if it's every day, it has to happen. Like it has to be part of your day. And so I think for you, like if you had to do this every day, you would be able to. Like it would take more time. You'd have to make changes, etc. But it would just become part of your day the way that your workouts, have become. And so for me, like the workout days, the hardest days are like the rest days, because like I've already done like a long run, and so I still need to get my points or whatever, but I can't do a whole lot. That's harder than the actual days when you're trying to like push things, I think. So for me, the structure has been very, very helpful, and I'm really glad that I made that commitment. And in some ways, maybe it's good. It's good for the audience as well, for the community, I think, because it shows them like, okay, this thing is there every day. I can depend on it. But I'm also the first to say that it's not just about the audience. It's also about me. It's about like my ability to like keep doing it, because I think, like I said, it would be harder for me to do it 3 or 4 days a week than it is to do it every single day.
Wow, wow, that's remarkable. I mean, it's like one of those things to me. When you create content, of course, podcast is a little bit easier than live streaming because you don't have that video element in that, and you can technically, as long as you have a good mic, and
Yep.
usually it's pre-recorded for you, right? You don't go live
Right.
with those podcasts, so you have the opportunity to edit out. So it's a little bit easier, but still, it's the matter of like you have to be hyped up, right? A little bit. You have to be
Sure.
in the mood for that. And if you had a really shitty day, like how do you show up? How do you
I
deal
mean,
with
I don't
it?
know. You have to be a professional. You have to show up. It's what people want. I mean, if I have a shitty day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect, like, I don't have to transfer that to my listeners. And in some ways, I can take positive energy. Like it's the opposite. In some ways, I can be like, okay, the day wasn't that great. Something really bad happened, but here, this is a cool story. Anya or whoever out there, somebody was able to do this thing. I get to tell their story, and somebody else is going to listen to that and learn from it. So. Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe that, and also I drink a lot of coffee. So both those things.
I love that one. Like there is always a secret weapon, some kind of a superhero trick, and that's
Hmm.
that's coffee. That's awesome. So your podcast features stories of entrepreneurial people who managed to build successful side hustles, or
Hmm.
even turn that into their full-time business opportunities and quit their regular jobs, which is always something that sounds amazing. Do you have a favorite story? It could be something super funny or super crazy or the most unexpected idea
Mm.
turned into a side hustle that you could share before we actually turn into questions from the community?
Do I have a favorite story? It's tough because, when I was doing the traveling thing more, and I went to every country in the world, like I would go and give these talks, and like literally every single talk, people would ask me the same question, which was like, "What's your favorite country?" And like I hated that question because like there's so many countries that like you don't want to just pick one country, and you don't want to pick one story. But I mean, I was just thinking like, what have I been working on recently? And so I just did a story about this guy who was really into archery, and like archery was his hobby. And So this is a super, super niche thing because he wanted to, like, he started making his own bowstrings, which apparently is important in archery. And to make the bowstrings, he made his own kit. And so it's like you got the bow, you got the strings, you got the kit to make the string, And so nobody else had done the kit like this before, and so he started selling it. And now he's making like $40,000 to $50,000 a year on the side, just selling this kit. And he still has his day job, And so it's very specific, right? It's like he's not making bows, he's not even making the bowstrings, no arrows, just this one little thing, right? But nobody had done that before. It helps that everybody in that hobby. It makes things easier for them or something. So I was thinking about that. What else was I thinking? There's a guy who does, he's like a computer hacker, like a good hacker, and he was like, there's this whole thing called bug bounties where you can go and find bugs or problems with like major corporate websites. And if you discover them, then they actually pay you like a reward for this, and which I had never really understood before. But like I did this whole story on him, and this was like a high school kid. And over the course of a couple of years, he made like $100,000 with it, which was like, wow, he's a high school kid. This is incredible,
Wow.
And
That
then
is really remarkable. Wow.
Yeah. Maybe just one more thing, since we're talking about live streaming, also something that I've changed my perspective on. Like I used to say, like when I was 20, for example, I was really into video games. Like I loved video games and I was pretty good at video games, but nobody ever came along and paid me, to play video games. And so I always gave that example because when we first started talking, we were talking about this convergence point and the intersection between your passion and like what other people value. And I was like, so playing video games, like something like that is just something you do for yourself. You don't actually do it to make money. Well, now, as you know, and like anybody watching the stream probably realizes, there are actually people who are getting paid to play video games online all day, right?
Yeah.
Using Twitch and other services. I'm sure that a lot of them have Restream accounts. So I did a story about a guy who was doing that, and just kind of looked into what is it actually like, right? Because if you're watching the stream, you don't necessarily understand the business side of it and all that. And you don't have to. Like you can just enjoy the stream. But I like to look at the details of it. So there's a few examples there. But I have a different story every day. So if people don't like those examples, there's plenty more.
Oh, can I share my favorite
Yeah, tell me,
from
please.
Side Hustle School?
Yeah.
It's really, I was so intrigued by it because that's one of the stories that didn't actually make it to the book, but you very briefly mentioned it at the very end. And this is about somebody who delivered crickets for people who own reptiles. And apparently that is, I was laughing so hard about that. I was like, oh my God, this is hilarious and brilliant, and I don't know what to think about it. Like I don't know what is the craziest part of it. But do you know more about that?
Sure.
Can you share a little bit? Because
I enjoyed working on that story because it's so wild and so random. But yes, if you own a reptile, as people do, then you have to feed it. And so crickets are like one of the primary food sources. So where do you buy your crickets from? So obviously like in different cities, there's a place you can go and buy crickets or whatever, but lots of places may not have a cricket store or whatever. So this guy started selling, live crickets that he would send through the mail. But the key point is, it's not like he had like a refrigerator like full of crickets or whatever. He was doing drop shipping. So for anybody who doesn't know what drop shipping is, like you never handle any inventory. So like you could be selling, I don't know, like a book or something, but like somebody places an order on your site and you send that information off to Amazon or whoever else, and they send the book. So you can operate this business without ever touching the inventory. So for him, that was key because he didn't want to, like in this case, he really doesn't want to touch the inventory. So it's not like he had any specialized knowledge, about crickets or reptiles or anything. It's all marketing. It's all just like I'm putting together the website, and he worked with a cricket farm, I don't know, somewhere in North Carolina or something, and he would send the information to them, and they would send the box of crickets. The only thing that was interesting that he learned was he did do a test shipment to make sure everything worked well. So he sent a shipment to himself. And there were supposed to be some instructions that were included, but the instructions were not in the box. And it turned out that the crickets will eat the paper that's in the box. So he learned through that experience, he has to email the instructions instead of including the paper.
My God. That is a brilliant know-how. Oh my God. I mean, that is actually like, yeah, this is the power of testing, right? And that's also something that you cover in a couple of books. A/B test and just test everything, make sure everything works as designed. And like, who would have known, right? Like the two instructions can be eaten by a product.
Yeah.
I think this is a great story. This is absolutely wonderful. I mean, I'm not an insect person at all. Like, I think if someone shipped me a box of crickets, that would result in, like pretty horror movie style scream on my end. But this is really remarkable. Like, I really enjoyed that story. I thought it was so funny. All right, so we are going to take some questions right now, and I already have a couple lined up. Let me remove our graphics here so they don't get mixed in with our questions. So here's the first one. This is a really good one. How would you go about pricing out your side hustle services? I always feel like I'm going to overcharge or undercharge. And I know this is something that you kind of cover in the side hustle, but it's a great question. So I would love for you to share that with the audience.
Of course. Yeah. And who's that question for? I think we saw that. Oh, that's from Augmentation Nation. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I was going to ask if you have a question, it can be helpful to say just a little bit about what your project is, because it can depend. But a couple of just simple rules of thumb. Like if you're just starting this for the first time, one thing is to make sure you know how much you get paid in your day job. Like if you have a salary, like understand like what your hourly rate is. Like how much do you earn more or less, for an hour worth of work or something. So you want your side hustle to be at least that much, and ideally it should actually be more because this is extra time that you're committing to. But that's kind of like your floor. It shouldn't cost anything less than that. You also have to make sure you account for like all the time that you spend on things, because if you're doing like coaching or consulting, for example, it's a very common like entry point for side hustling. You might have your hour-long conversation with somebody, but there's probably a lot of other work that you're doing. You're preparing for that conversation. Maybe you're sending them a follow-up report, all kinds of stuff. So you want to think about all that stuff. So just make sure that you're making at least as much, and then, I mean, depending on the industry, if you're doing something really specific, then maybe there's not a good comp. But if it's something that other people are doing, you just look and see what is the average, and you probably don't want to be, the highest or the lowest. You can just kind of start somewhere in that range and see how people respond. I mean, your goal is to always like charge the maximum that you can, but that people still accept, And what I've seen a lot with a lot of service providers, so this person's asking about like overcharging or undercharging. I think most service providers tend to undercharge at first, at least, because they're always afraid like, oh, no, nobody's going to buy for me or whatever. So if you have an experience where like you have a successful project, you're freelancing or whatever, and then eventually you raise your prices and nobody complains, it means that the price was too low, for a long time, right? Like if you raise the price and everybody is still there, then, you should have raised the price a long time ago. So it's good that you did it now.
Right. It does seem like it's a lot of people would try to play it safe and price things a little lower when they just start, because this trial and error is kind of part of the process, right? And you don't want to freak people out, because it's really hard to get the churned customers back if the reason why they decided not to go with you is because your price was outrageous to their, according to their concepts and opinions. So I think, yeah, it does make sense to start with something that, you would call your base, and then gradually add on to this. And you can always add on some extra services. That's another thing that you describe in the Side Hustle book, that you can start with the basic, like make it very affordable and accessible for most people, and then upsell, like offer something in addition to that. And it's also a great strategy to kind of like play with different pricing models and different opportunities. Alrighty, Victor here from LinkedIn is asking, do you believe that there's no such thing as a bad idea? It's all it's all the matter of execution. That's a good one.
That's a very good question.
Yeah,
what do you think, Anya?
I am a big believer. I'm not an idea person myself. I'm an execution person. This is kind of like my role in the company. And at least that's maybe my personal opinion about myself. Like, I'm one of those people, if I meet someone like you and you're like, hey, I have this amazing, brilliant idea, I'll be like, all right, right on it. Let me just build the process, create the things, get the resources, and make it happen. So for me, I do believe that they're just inherently like ill-conceived ideas, of course. But I think that execution is the key for sure for me. And you can turn most of the ideas into maybe not $1 billion company, but something profitable and successful if done right and if it's in the right hands. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think people like you who are, executors, like implementers, that's valuable. That's tremendously valuable. You don't want too many creative people on your team that are just always like, I got a bunch of ideas. Like, everybody has ideas. I think the majority of the value is always in the execution of the idea, the implementation. And I think about that when people feel worried about sharing their idea. Like, I don't want you to steal my idea. I'm like, I have too many ideas. I am not going to steal your idea, please. Like, nobody's going to steal your idea, actually, because anybody who is good at execution, they don't have any shortage of ideas. Like, ideas are there for the taking, and anybody who, is looking to steal your idea is probably not very good at execution, actually. So I think, you also said there are bad ideas. So I think there is such a thing as a bad idea, So I think if you have 5 ideas, it's helpful to say, okay, how can I figure out which one is going to be the most feasible, the quickest, the most profit potential, all that kind of stuff. But then once you make that decision, then, all the value is in making it happen. A friend of mine, Scott Belsky, wrote this book called Making Ideas Happen, which is all about this concept. It's like, there's a lot of ideas, but here's, what it's really about is making those ideas come to life.
Yeah, I agree. And if you think about this from the perspective, great idea, terrible execution versus terrible idea, great execution,
Yeah, sure.
I think the second one has more or less most of the time a slightly better chance to actually pan out, right?
Yeah.
Because, if you don't really follow through and if you don't make it happen, like, the best idea can be ruined. There's a follow-up question from Augmentation Nation. I'm mostly getting into graphic design. I would like to, I would say I get paid on average $20 an hour. So that's kind of the follow-up question to the, how do you price your services in order to not overcharge or undercharge? So do you have any specific comments for the graphic design industry?
Sure. I have a follow-up, which is that, so graphic design, I don't want to say it's a commodity because obviously there's a great deal of skill that goes into it, but there are a lot of graphic designers. Okay. So graphic design is a field. It's also a field in which, you can pay somebody like $25 to make your website, or you can pay $25,000 to make your website, right? Like, there's this huge range. And I think the number one thing you can do in that field, and fields like it as well, so anything where it takes a certain amount of technical and creative skill both, but there are a lot of people doing it. The number one thing you can do is be the graphic designer for X or for Y, for some specific thing. Like, I'm going to be the graphic designer that is focused entirely on live streamers. Live streamers have graphic design needs and such, so I'm going to actually focus on that. I knew somebody, we did a story on somebody who, she was really into dogs, she loved dogs and such, and she was a graphic designer. And so she chose to become a designer who focused on the pet industry and working with like various dog businesses. And eventually she expanded, but because she really branded that, it helped her so much. And she was able to charge a higher price, so she was able to go beyond $20 an hour. And I think that's the number one thing you can do is to say, I'm not just a general designer. I am the designer that does this specific thing for this kind of people.
Yeah, that's great. That's, absolutely love that. All righty. We have another question from Twitter here. It's Randy on Twitter saying, why wouldn't some start a side hustle? What are the major reasons people decide not to? Good one.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I'd love to hear from anybody else, who has a comment on that. I mean, let me say, first of all, that I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. I don't, I'm not an evangelist. I'm not like, hey, you need to go and do this, right? So there's enough people in the world who want this that I'm focused on them. Like, there's enough people in the world that are like, I want to make extra money. I need to do this. Like, help me figure it out. So if somebody's like, I'm not into it, I'm like, okay, cool. That's great. Do something else. But if you're in that category of people who want to, but you decide not to, okay, let's focus on that. Then I think it's, because you think there is some obstacle or constraint that hinders you, you're like, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't know what to do. I tried before and it didn't work. So now I feel discouraged. All of these kind of things, I think, are what people, tend to gravitate towards. So a lot of my work is like responding to that and saying, okay, well, like we've been talking this whole conversation, you don't actually need a lot of money. And if you can learn to do the right things, then it doesn't take a lot of time. It will take time, let's be clear, right? But if you want to invest in yourself, like anybody who's watching this stream right now, even though I know it's wildly entertaining, I would assume also that they're watching because they want to improve themselves. Like they're actually like, I want to invest in myself. How can I learn something? So if you're already in that category, you're going to choose to invest some of your time, but be as efficient as possible. If what was the third thing? Oh, I tried before and it didn't work. Well, we all try stuff and it doesn't work. The key point is like trying something different, right? I'll try something different. I'll try something new. So I think those are probably the most common reasons that I encounter, at least.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff for sure. And yeah, I think it's important to remember, at least that's the rule that I apply to myself every time I think about any project that I do within my work environment or outside of work, is that you always have 100 reasons not to start something, right? I have 100 reasons not to do this live streams. Yeah. I don't know how good I look on camera, probably not great. I don't think that English is not my native language, so I probably sound like a dork and like I mess up grammatically and pronunciation-wise half of the words that I'm saying. Technology hates me whenever I approach a computer. Usually the power goes out in the whole neighborhood. So there's so many things that I know about myself that are just not compatible with live streaming or with, hosting a show. And yet there's one reason to do it, right? Like to overcome yourself. Yeah. There's always one reason to either get yourself out of the comfort zone, give yourself that challenge, support your team, and be that person who's like, okay, I'll do it. That's okay. No one else wants to like get into this, but I'll take it. So there's always one reason, and just focus on that reason, because I think it's this voices of like, gosh, everything's going to go wrong are so loud in our heads. But just like create some space for that voice that says you got this, you can do it.
This is so great. I'm so glad you're saying that. This is so good.
I know, right?
This is what people need to hear, because like I said, I feel like I'm trying to adjust some of my work because I know people need the practical steps, and I want to keep doing that. I don't ever want to just be like inspirational, without giving the practical stuff. But I do know, because I hear it all the time, that people have like self-doubt and they have all these reasons for not, it's like, this limitation, this problem, this constraint, I will do it later. Maybe I don't need to do it, but anything we can do to like, help people get over that, or help people move past it, or see that it's not so scary. Maybe it seems scary, but it's actually going to be like really good for you, when you actually move forward with it. I think that's very helpful.
You don't know until you try. Absolutely. Yeah. Jake here from Twitter is asking, where do people find the times to run a side hustle? I love that one. As a busy person who is writing like a bunch of things at the company, and I'm sure for you, Chris, like you do so much. You do a podcast, you have a blog, you travel, you have speaking activities. Where does that time come from?
Well, people find it in different ways. And I think this is something that you have to ask yourself, like, how can you find the time? Okay. Because, can you spend 30 minutes a day doing something? Like, I never want to tell people like not to have a hobby, or like, don't watch your favorite TV show. If you have a favorite TV show, watch your favorite TV show, but maybe don't watch your favorite 10 TV shows, maybe like you give up something, you give up something to choose to invest in yourself, because you're thinking about the long term. So that's part of it. It's like short term, long term. The things that we do today are going to affect the options available to us in the future. And so if you want to have more options in the future, and money is somewhat, connected to that in some way, you have to make some different decisions now. Like your present is going to affect your future. So if you understand that, then the next thing is to say, okay, I'm going to invest a little bit of time. Maybe I just have 30 minutes a day or an hour a day. That's okay. Then I need to make sure that I'm doing the right things, because if you just have that short period of time, it can actually be a benefit. It can actually be really good, because you don't have so much time to mess around. You can't do everything, right? Actually, Restream is great with this, because I was just going to say, like, you can't be on every different social platform. You really should pick just a couple to focus on, which I think is true in general. But Restream is great because you can actually be on both of those, or three or whatever at the same time, with this live stream kind of thing.
Time saver, right there.
Right, exactly. So like, I remember when I was like a long time ago, I was an aid worker in West Africa. I was living on a hospital ship, and like I was very busy during the day with like this humanitarian work that I was doing that I loved, and it was really good. And then at night I had my little side hustle that's how I like made money. I would be doing stuff on the internet, but I only had like an hour a day maximum. And I was always really tired also at that point in time. And so I had to learn that if I didn't plan for that time, it wouldn't go well. If I didn't plan for that time, I would go and like sit at my laptop, and I'd just be so tired. And I'd be like reading the news websites, and like maybe I'd respond to some emails, but I wouldn't actually make progress. But if I thought, at some point during the day or whenever I had more energy, if I thought, what is the number one thing I need to do, during that hour? And then I did that. Then it was like I'm moving forward and making progress. So it's a personal, thing, but, people are able to do it.
Awesome. Awesome. We have a couple of live streaming related questions here that we're going to take as we will be transitioning into our last section of the interview when we actually talk a little bit more about live streaming. So we have Sammy O or Zero Joseph asking, please advise what kind of lights are you using for this broadcast? So Chris and I have different setups. We're in different areas. So I can tell you guys what I'm using and Chris can share what he is using for his. I'm using Elgato lights. I actually have two, one on each side. And this is definitely my favorite setup. I have a little kind of like not Chrome, but like your MacBook extension thing that allows you to control it directly from your laptop or from your phone, and you can control the warmth and the brightness of it, which was a huge upgrade because I used to have just light from my window, which fortunately I have a giant window. I live in Austin, Texas, where it's almost always sunny, except for when it's not and it's really dark, and except for the days when you have clouds, you kind of like have this constantly changing level of brightness on your thing. So now this has been fixed with the Elgato light. So thanks Elgato for great gear. What are you using, Chris?
Same thing. Elgato.
Oh my God, really? Here we go. How many do you have? Do you have like two or do you just use one?
I have two different studios that I'm working from. And so I have one in each studio basically. Okay. But I would also say, I do love the Elgato light. I think it's great, but I also have like just, I don't even know the brand, an O-ring light that I bought on Amazon, and it was like $30, and I think it's also good. You know what I mean? So if you don't want to spend whatever it was, $200 on the Elgato light, I think you can also just start with something small and it's good. But Elgato is good.
But to add on to that, just a generic comment: lights are your saver. Like you have no idea how much improvement you can get from your very basic Logitech camera, just the USB web camera, by introducing good lighting for your stream. You don't have to have this professional DLCR cameras in order to look good. The lighting is going to change your game big time. So definitely, if you have the opportunity to invest in either those lights or even the small, options that you can find on Amazon, do that because it's going to change your game. And last question we have here about which platform are you using to connect remote participants? So this is the question about like, how did Chris get here? We're using Restream Studio. I just sent him a guest link. You don't even have to have a Restream account in order to join. You just click that link if you're a guest, and then as a host, I can pull you in, and then I can do cool things like spotlight you like this, and we can change different formats. We can do like a selfie mode versus vertical mode. I personally hate selfie mode. That's why it's never here. But it's an option if you're into that. Your guest can also share your screen. I can share my screen. So there's a lot of things you can play with. And again, no account needed for a guest. So that's how you connect them. And for the overlays, it's also part of the studio. You can check it at restream.io/studio if you're interested, or contact our support. They'll walk you through this. All right. So let me hide all these questions and get back to our graphics. Let me quickly reintroduce you right here. For those who are just joining, as we are getting close to wrapping up, my guest is Chris Guillebeau today, and he is the New York best-selling author. He is writing books. His popular books are The Money Tree, $100 Startup, and The Side Hustle. He's also the host of a Side Hustle School podcast that you can find anywhere where podcasts are found. And he is also a world traveler, which is something we're going to touch on real quick here very soon. But before that, let's just really quick talk about your streaming, the live streaming experience that you recently started. So how did you decide to add on to your podcasting and actually go live as a video? Like, how did that decision come out?
So actually, it wasn't really up to me. I made the decision eventually, but it's a COVID story, right? COVID-19 story in the sense that I had this book coming out, The Money Tree. I was really excited about it. I've always done book tours. I usually go to a lot of different cities. For this one, I was planning on doing a really big tour. I was going to go to 40 cities in North America, the US and Canada, hopefully elsewhere as well eventually, but starting there. And I really believe in community. So it's not so much, and this is like a little bit of a side note, it's not like I'm actually making any money from going to speak to 100 people for free, and maybe some people buy the book. As an author, I make like $3 on every book that's sold. It's like, it's not about money. It's about the relationship with people. It's about the long-term relationships. I've been doing this for 10 years. And so I really believe in that model. But of course, wasn't able to do that. And the book came out April 7th, it just so happened to be, first of all, my birthday. And second of all, the lowest air travel day in the United States. Like the number of people was the fewest it's ever been, and even since. So that was like the lowest point, right?
Yeah.
So I had to do something different. And I was like, maybe I need to learn how to do this, because I do lots of interviews. I have lots of conversations, do the podcast, but I'd never actually done like, okay, I'm going to do live streaming. And I think if you're going to do something, it's helpful to commit to it for a while, right? So I was like, I'm going to do it for 30 days. So I did it every day on YouTube. And then after that, I've switched to weekly. So I'm still there on weekly every Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time, just kind of chatting with people and teaching. But it was really good. It was definitely a learning curve for me. But I'm really glad that I did it. I think it establishes a close relationship with people, like we were talking about before.
Awesome. Do you believe that this is kind of specific to your kind of activities? You're an author, you're a public speaker, or could other entrepreneurs and other side hustlers benefit from live streaming as well?
Oh, I think anybody who has something to share. I mean, any kind of message, and really, and when I say anybody who has something to share, everybody has something to share. Like there is some community that's interested in whatever it is. Like we've been talking about some really specific things in this conversation. So, I don't think, you should always be careful to add stuff on. You should always ask yourself, like, what is the reason for this? What is my intention for it? Can I support it in addition to whatever else I'm doing? I think that's a good question to ask in life in general. So I don't want to burden people and say, like, you have to do this. But I would say if you're interested in it, if you're like, what is a good way that I can connect with people? How can I, develop my skills? And this is a new economy. So how do we do it? Then I think it's certainly something anybody can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So many people wrote books. It's not hard these days, but very few people manage to build a movement, speaking of the community, right? So you have this whole concept of your own philosophy, so to say. You have the Art of Non-Conformity, and you basically preach and teach people that being different, being original could be the path for success and the opportunity you to actually stand out, because you don't follow the kind of like path that other people want you to follow, and do the right things, check the boxes that other people maybe in your surrounding, in your family, in your friends tell you, like, hey, you got to work this corporate job, you got to save up, you got to buy the house, get married, like all those things. Right. I think this is very powerful. And how is this movement evolving, and what do you use what kind of strategies and tactics do you use to keep your community galvanized around your ideas?
Yeah, I want to make sure I actually think about that before I answer. I think it's important to note that this is, like, there are ideas that I'm sharing. There are things I'm putting forward. I'm writing books and such. But just as importantly, it's what other people are doing and what they are contributing, and not just contributing, but other people who have somehow connected with something that I'm doing. They go on and they write a book, or they start a conference, or they start a business. And I feel really fortunate to be connected in this like hub and spoke kind of model. But it is at least 50% organic and undeveloped and unstrategic. And so when I think about like, what are my strategies and tactics? I'm like, well, I show up. I do what I say I'm going to do. I put the podcast out every day. I try to write a book every year, every other year. When I'm excited about a project, I will do it. Like I did a course for LinkedIn recently that was actually really fun. And I was like, this sounds good. I don't really have time to do this right now, but it sounds fun. So let's do it. That's how I'm motivated. That's how I live my life. Like I work a lot, but I do things that I enjoy. I'm glad to be able to do this. So why wouldn't I want to do it more? So I don't think there's like a huge strategy, tactic, et cetera. It's more like just trying to be intentional and trying to do something that's helpful, over time.
Yeah, great. And you also don't do the small talk. That's also part of one of your podcast episodes when you're like, yeah, people do small talk so often, but if you actually show up and start talking about interesting things, like, big questions, big ideas, people will actually be like, wait a minute, like, this guy's not talking about weather and just like random stuff. Like he means what he says. So I think that's part of the appeal. Definitely that's what I was hooked up on when I was listening to your books. I was like, oh gosh, he's he's serious. He's talking
Yeah,
about
that's good. Okay, I'm
real
glad to hear that.
things.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you traveled the world, all 193 countries. For those
Mhm.
people who don't know how many they are, that's the number. Can you share the story how that happened? Because that's a dream for a lot of people to travel the
Mhm.
world. I'm a big traveler. I
Yeah.
mean, I was born in Russia and moved to the United States, and I always that was my number one passion
Mhm.
growing up and as a young person and till today. Like if I can do anything with my free time or money, that's what I will do. I'll travel, I'll explore. How did your world traveling story start, and how did you end up visiting all the countries in the world?
Well, it started kind of like you. I mean, I wasn't born in Russia, but like travel was very important to me. Like when I was a kid, I lived in the Philippines for a couple of years and some other places, and then like we were talking about, I spent some time in West Africa as an aid worker. So when I was there, I got comfortable traveling in circumstances that are a little bit different than like traveling in America or wherever. Um, and I've always been very goal oriented. Like you also mentioned, like your workout streak or whatever. So I have my workout streak, and I also with the countries. Once I had been traveling a while, I was like, how many countries have I been to? And I made a list. And I was like, oh, I've been to like 30 countries. That's cool. Um, and so then I set a goal of going to 100 countries. I was like, one day I want to get to 100 countries. That's like more like close to half the countries in the world. Actually a little bit more than half, but let's say half. And then once I got close to that, it was like, what's the next logical goal? Well, the next logical goal is you have to go to all of them, because it's easy to go to half, because if you only go to half of something, then you can choose, like if you get stuck somewhere, or if you can't get a visa somewhere, well, you just don't go there. You go somewhere else. And so that's why I thought the real challenge is going to be to try to get to all of them. And so it really was just a personal challenge for the first half of it. Like I didn't have a blog until I'd been to like 80 to 90 countries. And that's when I was like, maybe I should share this with people, but it wasn't about fame. I wasn't trying to be like the fastest person or the youngest person or anything at all like that. It was more just like, I'm curious, and I like to work towards specific goals and milestones, and I like to travel. So why don't I put these things together? And that's what I came up with. And so it was it was a life-changing experience. I loved it. And I don't want to go back to all 193 countries. Like some people have like, why don't you go back to everyone in like the opposite order or something? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that, but I'm really glad that I was able to do it.
No, that's amazing. That's definitely something I dreamt about, and this is why I was super interested in the side hustle idea, because I was like, if I ever do that, I probably won't be able to keep my job. I mean, it's going to be possible, but very difficult. But like, what other sources of income I can have?
Right.
So yeah, definitely very very nice connection right there. So I know you hate the question with what's your favorite country, so I'm not going to ask you that, because I also agree that this is a weird question. When people ask me that, I'm also like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like, it's different. But I will ask you two questions about what was the most difficult country for you to get to, because I'm really curious. I mean, out of 193 countries, I'm sure some were super easy and others were very challenging.
Yeah.
So what was the most kind of like the hardest to overcome in terms of checking that box and getting that country on the list?
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Sometimes people say like, what are the dangerous countries? I don't like that one either. So like the way you ask, it's really good, because like, the most difficult countries to get to were not dangerous. It was difficult because of bureaucracy, because of visa issues, because, okay, this country is aligned, with Saudi Arabia or whatever. And so it's like, blah, blah, blah. So let's see, what was difficult to get to? So visa issues for sure. So I went to like Syria and Yemen and Libya. I mean, fortunately, I went to those places a number of years ago. It was a little bit different situation than it is now, but those were hard to get visas for. A number of countries in Africa can be difficult or a little bit closed off. Mauritania is a difficult country to get to. Somalia, difficult to get to. But then also, in addition to the visas, you have some countries that are just really, really small, and like in the South Pacific. And so like nobody goes there. I would say nobody, I'm exaggerating, of course, but like very, very few flights are going there. It's like there's like one flight a week, or something for 10 people. So there's a couple places like that I really had to plan for. And I'm not always so good at planning. So when I came to the end, it was like, I had to really know, okay, like 3 weeks from now, I'm going to fly to New Zealand, and then I'm going to fly to Tonga, and then I'm going to fly, to the actual country that I'm trying to get to. Whereas in the beginning, it was really just easy, because like Europe, there's so many countries in Europe, you just kind of go around, right? Or different parts of Southeast Asia or whatever. But I think, so it's either one of those like African countries, or it's one of those Micronesian South Pacific countries.
That's so interesting because I thought you would say North Korea because I've heard that this is extremely difficult for American citizens to actually make happen. Because I was kind of researching that at some point, and because
Mm,
I'm American citizen right now as well,
yeah.
and my
Okay.
significant others too, we were
Mm,
thinking about that. And what from my very basic research, I realized that it's going to be a challenge. But it sounds like you were able to overcome it. It was like not even
yeah,
that
they
difficult.
have made some changes actually. So you used to be able to go and do a tour from Beijing and go there as an American, but as yeah, in the past few years, not so much.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
got you. Any country that made a really big impression of you that you would like to share?
Mm,
Any like moment that was like, oh wow, this was like mind opening. And while you're thinking, I'll share mine. Like one of my
sure.
biggest impressions was living in Africa. Also, I wasn't
Mm,
like volunteering like you did, but I was actually working on a commercial project. But when I first went to Tanzania,
mm,
from Russia in my 20s, when I thought, the world is my oyster, and like living in Europe and being used to European kind of
yeah.
things, it was such a mind blowing experience for me in
Mm,
terms of how different the life is there, how different the values are,
mhm,
how peaceful and like how untouched is the nature. There were just so
mhm,
many different things about like the things that I was used to in mega gigantic city of Moscow versus a small
mhm.
island in Tanzania, that it literally turned my world upside down, and I came back completely enlightened. Did you have any kind of experience like that that you can
Mm.
recall?
Yeah, I mean, I had a number of experiences like that in Tanzania. Is beautiful. Was it Zanzibar you were in, or somewhere
It was
else?
actually Mafia Island. It's like a
Okay.
very small and remote
So
place, and that was part of the equation. Like that's why
yeah,
it was so impressive and so different from what I was used
yeah.
to.
So one of the countries that I actually lived in for a while was Liberia, and in West Africa, and it was right after a pretty extensive civil war there. But I had a really, I was going to say good, but good is like a boring word. You know, I had a very intense, like emotional connection to that place and to the people, and people were just so friendly and hospitable. And you know, I see that in so many parts of the world where people don't have a lot. You know, like I obviously have so much more. Anybody coming from the West has so much more, but yet they're the ones that are inviting you into their home, and like, you know, you bring a gift or something, but then they have a gift for you and you're like, why do they have a gift for me? Like they don't, you know. So I encountered that a lot, and I think it still kind of affects my worldview a bit.
That's awesome. That's so beautiful. Well, that is going to be our show. Thank you so much,
Mhm.
Chris, for sharing. Thank you,
Awesome.
everybody, for showing up and asking your great questions. This was wonderful. It was great to
Mhm.
have you. And yeah, I mean, I'm so glad we were able to connect. And
Mhm.
I wish you best of luck. I hope coronavirus goes away soon and you'll be back to traveling, which is your
Yeah.
passion, and back to touring and connecting with the
Mm.
people that read your books and follow your movement in person, because that's so important. And you do such a great job with that.
Well, thank you. I very much enjoyed the conversation. A big fan of Restream, and thanks to everybody for watching.
Absolutely. I'm going to do a quick closing here, and you're welcome to hang out, and I'll pull you right back in once we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and hide you real quick here. Alrighty, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing this conversation with Chris. Really, not a small talk at all. Pretty exciting stuff. I am going to make a quick announcement here regarding the next Friday lives. I am actually going to be off on vacation all next week, but on July 31st on Friday, we will still have Friday lives. It's going to be hosted by my coworker Victor. So please share some love, give him a warm welcome, show up, say hello. We are going to have a great show for you with another guest speaker. And we will be announcing that next week, early next week. It's going to go to all our social channels. And other than that, I would love to wish you a wonderful Friday. Have a great weekend. And thanks again. Bye.